The wind in northern Montana had a way of cutting straight through you, as if it wanted to test what you were made of. For Sarah Collins, that wind was her first teacher. She grew up in a small wooden cabin at the edge of the Bitterroot Mountains, where winters could bury fences and freeze water lines for weeks. Her father, a quiet Vietnam veteran with a steel gaze, taught her two things early on: how to hold a rifle and how to hold her breath. By the time she was 10, she could outshoot most of the grown men in the nearby hunting lodge. She didn't brag about it. Sarah wasn't built for words. Her victories came in the shape of perfect shots and calm silences. When the boys at school mocked her for being too serious, she didn't flinch. "She's like a statue," they'd whisper. They didn't understand that stillness was her strength. Her father used to say, "Still hands, clear mind, and patience win every battle." Those words settled deep in her bones. She carried them long after he passed away in her senior year of high school. While most of her classmates scattered to college or construction jobs, Sarah walked straight into a Navy recruiting office on a Tuesday morning. The recruiter, a man with salt and pepper hair and a laugh that filled the room, barely looked up from his paperwork when she spoke. "I want to join the Navy," she said. He smiled politely. "All right, and what job are you thinking about?" She paused. "I want to try for the SEALs." The laugh that followed wasn't cruel, just disbelieving. "That's not really an option for—" "I know," she interrupted, steady as a rifle scope, "but it will be." It took her nearly a year of preparation just to get to BUD-S, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, the course designed to break anyone who thought they were tough. When she arrived at the base in California, she stood among 200 men, the Pacific wind whipping through their uniforms. The instructors didn't need to say anything. Their smirks said it all. She didn't belong. The first week nearly destroyed everyone. The ocean was an unforgiving beast. They ran miles in wet sand, carried telephone poles on their shoulders, and plunged into surf so cold it burned. Men twice her size quit before the sun rose. Sarah didn't. Every time her muscles screamed, she remembered her father's voice in the Montana wind: still hands, clear mind, patience. On the fourth night of Hell Week, the instructors called for surf torture. The trainees locked arms and lay in the freezing waves as the tide rolled over their faces. Beside her, one man cried out, begging to quit. Another passed out. Sarah stared at the black sky, her teeth chattering, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Collins, an instructor, shouted over the surf, "You cold?" "Yes, sir," she barked. "You want to quit?" "No, sir." "Then what do you want?" Her lips were blue, but her answer was clear: "I want to stay." That night when the survivors stumbled back to the barracks, one man muttered, "She's not human." Another whispered, "She won't last the month." Sarah ignored them. She didn't come to make friends, she came to earn a trident. Months later, only 34 candidates out of the original 200 finished. Sarah stood among them, soaking wet, bruised, exhausted, but smiling for the first time in months. When the commanding officer pinned the SEAL insignia on her chest, the courtyard went silent. The same instructors who once laughed now nodded quietly. That night, alone in her bunk, Sarah held the small metal trident in her hand. It wasn't just a symbol, it was proof that silence, endurance, and precision could shatter every boundary. The world didn't know it yet, but Lieutenant Sarah Collins had just stepped into history. And for those who once doubted her, they'd soon learn. The quiet ones are the most dangerous of all. The desert wind of Virginia Beach carried the sound of gunfire across the Naval Special Warfare Training Center, where the Navy's most elite marksmen honed their craft. Among them stood Lieutenant Sarah Collins, her hands wrapped around the cold steel of a .300 Winchester Magnum rifle. Her eyes didn't blink as the target swayed half a mile away. "Shooter ready," barked the instructor. Sarah exhaled softly, "Ready." The wind shifted. She adjusted 2 clicks left, her heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of her breath. "Send it." Crack. The steel target rang clear, dead center. The instructor glanced through his spotting scope and raised his brows. That's 3 in a row, not bad for a rookie. But Sarah wasn't a rookie. She had spent years perfecting stillness, the kind that comes only from silence and solitude. For her, sniping wasn't about glory. It was meditation. The trigger wasn't a weapon. It was a key to focus, a place where the world narrowed to one heartbeat, one decision. When she entered the SEAL sniper course, most of her classmates didn't know what to make of her. Some were friendly enough, but others whispered jokes in the barracks when they thought she couldn't hear. "Collins is good at shooting paper," one said. "Let's see what happens when she's shooting people." "She won't handle the pressure," another snickered. Sarah didn't react. She didn't waste energy on noise. Every hour they spent talking, she spent practicing. Her days began before sunrise. She'd crawl across the dirt range, camouflage caked to her face, rifle dragging behind her, blending into the earth until she disappeared completely. Her instructors would scan through binoculars, trying to find her. Sometimes it took them 15 minutes. Once it took nearly an hour. When Chief Instructor Mason Hart, a grizzled veteran with 30 years of field experience, finally spotted her one afternoon, he couldn't help but smile. "Collins," he said, "you're the only one who made me doubt my own eyes." She replied quietly, "That's what a sniper's supposed to do, sir." It wasn't long before she became the one everyone secretly watched during drills. She'd measure the wind by a single blade of grass, time her shots between gusts, and hit targets others couldn't even locate. It wasn't just accuracy, it was instinct. Still, the pressure was relentless. One week the instructors simulated full combat chaos, machine gun fire, smoke, explosions, designed to shake the sniper's nerves. During one drill, a loud detonation went off beside Sarah's position, sending dust into her scope. Her finger froze mid-trigger pull, but her eyes stayed locked. She waited, recalibrated, and squeezed. The bullet sliced through the chaos and struck dead center. Chief Mason lowered his clipboard. "That," he said, "is ice in the veins." But perfection came with a price. The sniper program was mentally brutal, days without sleep, endless tests, and the weight of knowing one mistake could cost lives. Some candidates snapped under the pressure. Sarah didn't. Yet every night when the others collapsed into their bunks, she stayed awake cleaning her rifle piece by piece, like a ritual. One evening, Mason found her sitting alone on the firing platform, the sky painted in fatting orange. "You know," he said, lowering himself beside her, "most people shoot to prove something." Sarah kept her gaze forward. "And what do you think I'm shooting for?" He studied her face for a moment, the reflection of the setting sun glinting in her eyes. "You're not shooting to prove. You're shooting to protect." She gave a small nod. "Someone has to." By the end of the course, her reputation had spread across the base. Instructors whispered about the ghost sniper, the one who could vanish into any terrain and hit a moving target at impossible distances. The final test was a nightmare. A 36-hour endurance trial in freezing rain, no sleep, no food, and a target over a mile away. Most failed. Sarah didn't. She lay prone in the mud, rain dripping into her eyes, hands steady on the trigger. Her body was shaking with exhaustion, her vision blurring, but her mind was sharp. She slowed her breathing until everything vanished except the crosshairs and the faint shimmer of her target. One heartbeat, one pull, crack. The echo of her shot rolled across the field, followed by the unmistakable metallic ping of impact. Dead center. Chief Mason broke the silence. "Congratulations, Collins. You didn't just pass, you set the record." For the first time, a rare smile crossed her face, but when the applause came, she turned away. The sound didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet hum of the wind, the feel of the rifle against her cheek, and the calm certainty that she had found her purpose. Sarah Collins wasn't just a sniper now. She was the kind of warrior you never saw coming. Until it was too late. The heat in Afghanistan was a different kind of enemy. It didn't strike like bullets, it suffocated, clinging to every inch of skin and gear until soldiers felt it in their bones. Lieutenant Sarah Collins had been deployed for barely a week when she realized that no amount of training could prepare anyone for this kind of silence, an unforgiving quiet that was never truly still. Somewhere out there, the enemy listened too. Her team, SEAL Team 9, operated deep in the eastern mountain range near Provence, a labyrinth of stone, dust, and hidden death. Their mission: dismantle an insurgent network planting IEDs along U.S. supply routes. The terrain was so jagged that even satellites struggled to capture movement. That's where Sarah came in, the eye in the hills. From dawn to dusk, she watched over her team from a half a mile away, her sniper rifle steady on a bipod scope trained on the valley below. Her call sign was Spectre 1. Fitting, the men said, since she barely spoke and seemed to appear from nowhere. But not everyone was comfortable being covered by a woman. During the first mission briefing, Chief Petty Officer, a seasoned SEAL with 20 years in, leaned back and muttered, "No offense, Lieutenant, but we need someone who can keep up. Not someone who's gonna hesitate when things go loud." The room went quiet. Sarah met his eyes, calm, unflinching. "I don't hesitate," she said simply. The first few missions went smoothly, if uneventfully. Sarah's overwatch kept her team safe from ambushes that could have been fatal. She spotted hidden lookouts, intercepted communications, and called out enemy movement before anyone else even saw it. Still, the skepticism lingered. The jokes were quieter now, but they hadn't stopped. Then came Operation Iron Veil, a mission that would carve itself into every soldier's memory. The objective was to intercept an arms convoy suspected of supplying local insurgents. The team would move through a narrow valley at sunrise. Sarah's role: overwatch from the high ground on the North Ridge, covering a kill zone nearly 900 meters long. She arrived at her post under the cover of darkness, moving like smoke across the rocks. Her suit blended her into the terrain until she became part of it, just another shadow in the mountains. She set up her rifle, adjusted for wind, and radioed in. "Spectre 1 in position, eyes on the route, all quiet." "Copy that," came the reply. "Stay sharp." For hours nothing moved but the dust swirling through the air. Then through her scope she caught it, a glint of metal, not from the convoy but from the ridge opposite hers. Too high for a passing vehicle, too still. Someone was already there. "Command, I've got glass on a possible overwatch position, north by northeast, confirming optics reflection." "Copy, Spectre, maintain visual." Seconds later, a single crack echoed across the valley, a sniper's shot. The round hissed past her ear and shattered the rock beside her. She rolled instinctively, heart pounding, fingers gripping her rifle. The enemy sniper had seen her first. For the next few minutes they played a deadly game of hide and seek, two ghosts in the mountains, both trained to wait, both trained to strike. Sarah flattened against the dirt, eyes scanning for any flicker of movement. The sun was rising fast, and with it came betrayal. The light would reveal her position. Then she saw it, a faint shimmer of heat, the glint of a barrel half hidden in the rocks. Her instincts took over. She exhaled, the world narrowing to a single breath. Crack. The enemy sniper dropped instantly, his rifle tumbling down the slope. Her radio crackled. "Spectre, was that you?" "Target neutralized," she whispered. "Continue mission." Below, her team advanced through the valley, unaware that their lives had just been saved. But the danger wasn't over. 10 minutes later, the first IED detonated, then another. Dust clouds swallowed the convoy route. Gunfire erupted from the cliffs. Over the radio, a frantic voice shouted, "We're pinned. Sniper support, where the hell are you?" Sarah adjusted her scope, searching for the ambushers through the haze. Her heartbeat slowed. Her voice came through calm and steady. "Spectre 1 on overwatch," she said. "I'm here." And with that she squeezed the trigger, once, twice, 3 times, each shot deliberate, precise, final. The echoes rolled through the valley like thunder. When the smoke cleared and her team regrouped, looked up toward her ridge and whispered, half in disbelief, "She saved us." That night when they returned to base, the joke stopped for good. No one laughed anymore. They had seen the legend for themselves. Lieutenant Sarah Collins wasn't just a sniper. She was a storm that struck without warning, silent, unseen, unstoppable. The sky above Afghanistan bled gold and crimson as the sun began to climb over the jagged ridges of the valley. Lieutenant Sarah Collins adjusted the focus on her scope, her rifle resting steady against her shoulder. The air was heavy with dust and silence, a silence that always came before something terrible. Her team, SEAL Team 9, was moving through the valley floor below, a thin column of figures cutting across the earth like shadows. Through her headset came the low hum of radio chatter. "Spectre 1, this is Bravo Lead. How's the view up there?" Sarah scanned the horizon. "Clear, no movement, you're good to move." "Copy that, let's make this quick." It was supposed to be routine, a recon and clear mission, nothing unusual. But in war, the word routine was a lie soldiers told themselves to stay calm. The team advanced carefully between the cliffs, boots crunching on gravel. The valley walls loomed too close, too steep. It was a kill box, and Sarah knew it. Her gut tightened. She adjusted her scope again, panning across the ridges. Then she saw it, a flicker of light, just for a second, a reflection. Her instincts screamed. "Bravo Lead, hold position," she snapped. "You've got movement on the east ridge." But it was too late. The explosion ripped through the air, tossing dirt, smoke, and bodies like rag dolls. The shockwave knocked her headset askew. Below, chaos erupted, automatic fire echoing off the canyon walls. "Ambush, ambush, contact east and west," someone yelled. Sarah's heartbeat slammed against her ribs. Through her scope, she saw muzzle flashes bursting from the enemy. Fire poured down like a storm. Her team dove for cover, pinned between the cliffs. "Spectre 1, we're hit. Is down, we can't move." She scanned for an angle, but her line of sight was blocked. The high ridges hid the shooters from her position. She needed a new vantage point. "Copy, hold tight," she said. Then she crawled. Sarah slid backward, keeping her rifle low, every movement deliberate. The ground was uneven, hot under the morning sun. She found a crevice and started scaling upward, hands clawing into the rocks. Her gear weighed her down, but she didn't stop. Bullets snapped through the air above her like hornets. One hit a rock inches from her head, spraying stone chips across her face. Still, she climbed. Her breath came in harsh, steady bursts. When she reached the plateau, she dropped flat and aimed again. Her scope found them, 5 insurgents positioned behind a cluster of boulders, firing down into the valley. They were organized, confident. They thought they were safe. Sarah slowed her breathing. Her hands went still. The world shrank until there was only her, the rifle, and the targets. She whispered under her breath, "Still hands, clear mind." Then she fired. The first shot punched through the chest of the gunner on the far left. He dropped before his finger could squeeze the trigger again. The second turned toward the sound, cracked, and fell backward. "Two down," she said into the radio, voice calm as ice. Her teammates below shouted in surprise. "Who's firing? Is that Spectre?" But she didn't answer. She was already lining up her third shot. A round tore into her cover, narrowly missing her cheek. She didn't flinch. She adjusted windage, corrected for distance, and fired again. Another enemy dropped. The remaining 2 scattered, scrambling behind rocks. She tracked one as he ran, crack, and the man fell mid-stride. "4 down," she whispered. The last shooter panicked, trying to flee toward the tree line. Sarah followed him through her scope, her finger tightening slowly. Crack. The man fell face first into the dust. Silence. Only the wind and the faint echo of the last shot remained. Down below, the team began to move again. "Spectre 1, report." She keyed her mic. "All targets neutralized, you're clear to move." A pause, then a voice came through the static, low and awed. "She's not gone," breathed. "She's saving us." Sarah stayed still, scanning for any remaining threats. Her pulse was steady, her breath even. To her, it wasn't about vengeance, it was about balance, about restoring calm to chaos. When the team finally reached her position hours later, the battlefield was silent. Spent shells lay around her like gold rings in the dirt. She was sitting cross-legged beside her rifle, face streaked with dust, expression unreadable. Chief approached, limping, his arm bandaged. "You're one hell of a ghost, Collins." She looked at him, eyes sharp but calm. "Ghosts don't miss," she said simply. And that day, everyone in SEAL Team 9 learned something they'd never forget. You can laugh at a storm until it finds you. You can doubt a sniper until her bullets find their mark. The smoke still clung to the air, heavy and bitter, curling like ghosts over the scorched valley. Lieutenant Sarah Collins lay motionless on her ridge, her rifle resting against her shoulder, her cheek pressed into the dirt. She could hear the faint hum of the wind, and beneath it, the distant groans of wounded men. The ambush had shattered her team, but not broken them. "Spectre 1, Kame's voice through the comms, shaky but alive. "We've got 2 down, 3 wounded. Enemy fire slowing, but we can't move." Sarah blinked through the scope. Dust clouds rolled through the valley, turning the landscape into a haze of gold and gray. She could barely see shapes, just flickers of movement, shadows darting between rocks, muzzle flashes in the distance. She took a breath, deep and measured. In through the nose, out through the soul. That's what her father used to say before they went hunting. She could almost hear his voice now, calm and steady in her mind. She focused on the nearest flicker. A man with an AK-47 stepped from behind a rock, scanning for survivors. Sarah's finger found the trigger. Crack! He fell instantly. "Spectres engaging," someone shouted over the radio. "We've got cover fire." But it wasn't cover fire, it was precision. Every shot Sarah fired had a purpose. She wasn't just keeping them alive, she was dismantling the enemy piece by piece. Her scope shifted. Another insurgent higher up the slope was adjusting a mortar tube. Crack, gone. A third tried to drag his wounded comrade away. Crack, both fell silent. 2 targets down. Correction, make that 3, Sarah murmured. Below, her teammates began to move again, crawling from rock to rock, emboldened by the thunder of her rifle. They couldn't see her, but they didn't need to. Her presence was in every bullet that saved them. Then came a sound she didn't like, the sharp whoosh of a rocket-propelled grenade. It struck 20 meters from position, sending debris flying. Sarah gritted her teeth. She tracked the smoke trail back to its origin. An insurgent crouched behind a ridge, reloading another RPG. She had seconds. Wind direction southwest, range 680 meters, angle 3 degrees up. She didn't think, she calculated. Her breathing slowed, her heart synced with the wind. Crack! The round hit the grenade just as the man lifted it. The explosion lit up the ridge like lightning. The shockwave rippled across the valley. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then someone over the radio whispered, awestruck, "Holy hell, she hit the rocket mid-load." Sarah didn't answer. She just reloaded calmly, brass casings dropping beside her like coins. The remaining insurgents began to flee, dragging their weapons toward the tree line. Sarah shifted positions, tracking them as they ran. One by one she picked them off, clean, deliberate, efficient. Each shot was an ending. Each echo a warning. When the final man fell, the valley went still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Spectre 1 called, "Status." Sarah's voice came through steady as stone. "All targets neutralized. Area clear." There was a long silence on the other end. Then's voice broke through again, lower this time, softer. "Copy that, Spectre. We owe you our lives." Sarah exhaled and finally lifted her head from the rifle. Her muscles trembled from hours of stillness. She could feel the sting of sweat and dust in her eyes. Her pulse was calm now, her breathing quiet. She reached into her vest and pulled out a small patch of cloth, a faded piece of her father's old hunting jacket. She pressed it against her rifle stock for a moment, grounding herself. Then she looked down at the valley where her team was regrouping, tiny moving dots against the scorched landscape. Over the comms she heard again, half laughing through exhaustion. "For a minute there, we thought you were gone." Sarah's reply was faint but firm. "I don't go, I reposition." That line became legend. Back at base, the story spread faster than wildfire. The SEAL sniper who vanished into the mountains had single-handedly turned an ambush into a victory. Commanders wanted reports, soldiers wanted to shake her hand. But when they found her cleaning her rifle quietly under the awning of her tent, she didn't look like a hero. She looked like someone just trying to breathe again. When one young Marine asked her how she did it, how she stayed so calm, she looked up and said softly, "You don't fight the storm, you become the eye of it." And that's what she was. Not the loudest, not the strongest, but in the chaos. The shot that changed everything wasn't just the one that killed the enemy sniper. It was the moment Sarah Collins stopped being underestimated and started becoming unstoppable. The flight back to base was silent, except for the low hum of the rotors. Dust and blood clung to every uniform and exhaustion settled deep in every face. Lieutenant Sarah Collins sat near the open door of the Black Hawk, helmet off, her rifle across her lap. The desert wind whipped her hair, carrying the smell of burned earth. Below them, the valley faded into the haze, a graveyard of smoke and silence. Sat across from her, his left arm wrapped in bandages, eyes fixed on the floor. For the first time since she'd met him, he didn't have a joke to tell. After a long minute, he looked up and said, "You saved our asses back there, Spectre." Sarah just nodded. "You'd have done the same for me." He cracked a faint smile. "No, I wouldn't have hit that RPG midair. That was something else." When the chopper landed at the forward operating base, soldiers rushed out to meet them. Medics took the wounded. The rest of the team trudged toward the debriefing tent. Sarah followed, her boots heavy with mud and blood. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The commanding officer, Captain Briggs, stood waiting, arms crossed. He had already read the situation report and seen the drone footage. He'd seen the impossible. "Lieutenant Collins," he began, voice sharp, "you took out 8 hostiles in under 6 minutes, confirmed hits from nearly 1,000 meters out under enemy fire." "Yes, sir." "And you neutralized a rocket before it launched." "Yes, sir." He studied her face for a long moment. "How?" Sarah hesitated. "I just did my job." Standing beside her, laughed hoarsely. "Her job, sir, was to be gone. That's what we thought. But she wasn't gone, she was saving us." The room fell silent. Briggs finally nodded. "You did more than save them, Lieutenant. You saved the mission." A week later, Sarah was flown back to Air Base for debrief and recovery. For most soldiers, it would have been a chance to rest. But Sarah couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces, the men she'd shot, the explosion, the silence afterward. It wasn't guilt exactly, it was weight, a weight she couldn't put down. On her third night, Chief Mason, her old sniper instructor, showed up at her tent. His face was older now, more lined, but his eyes still carried the same quiet authority. "I heard about Iron Veil," he said. "Heard you turned that valley into a rifle range." Sarah shrugged slightly. "It was messy." "War always is," he said. "But what you did out there, that was history." He set a small envelope on the table beside her cot. Inside was a letter bearing the Department of the Navy seal. Her name was printed neatly across the top. Lieutenant Sarah M. Collins, nomination for the Silver Star. She stared at it for a long moment, unmoving. "I don't deserve this," she said finally. Mason smiled faintly. "That's exactly why you do." A month later, under a pale blue Afghan sky, the ceremony was held. Soldiers from every division gathered in the dusty courtyard, their uniforms pressed, faces solemn. Sarah stood at attention as Captain Briggs read from the citation. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy of the United States, Lieutenant Sarah Collins displayed exceptional bravery, precision, and composure under direct enemy fire, saving the lives of her team and ensuring mission success. When he pinned the silver star on her chest, the crowd erupted in applause, but Sarah didn't smile. She only saluted, then stepped back into formation, her face expressionless. Later, in the quiet of her barracks, she set the medal on her desk beside her rifle. The silver gleamed under the single hanging bulb, sharp and cold. To her, it wasn't a reward, it was a reminder. Every ounce of that shine had been bought with blood and silence. Outside, the base buzzed with celebration. But Sarah sat alone, dismantling her rifle, cleaning each part like she always did. The motion was meditative, mechanical, necessary. It kept her from thinking about the sound a man makes when he falls. Poked his head through the door. "You coming to the mess hall? They're actually serving real coffee for once." She didn't look up. "Maybe later." He hesitated, then nodded. "You did good, Collins, real good." As the door shut behind him, she whispered, "Good doesn't feel like this." The desert wind slipped through the cracks of the tent, rustling the thin canvas walls. She looked at her rifle, her medal, her reflection in the steel barrel. Hero, they called her. But heroes don't sleep easy. That night, long after the base lights went out, the sound of her heartbeat filled the silence. And in that rhythm, somewhere between exhaustion and memory, Sarah realized something she couldn't ignore. The fight wasn't over. Not on the battlefield. Not inside her. 6 months had passed since the Iron Veil mission, but for Lieutenant Sarah Collins, time hadn't moved at all. The Afghan dust had long been washed from her boots, yet it clung to her memory, dry, unshakable, eternal. She was back in the United States now, stationed at California, the home of the Navy SEALs. Blue skies, palm trees, ocean breeze. It was paradise on paper, but Sarah didn't feel it. She stood at the edge of the pier one morning, the Pacific rolling beneath her feet. Waves crashed softly against the pylons. In her mind, though, it wasn't water she heard. It was gunfire echoing off the mountains. Had gone home to Texas. 2 others from her team were still in rehab, learning to walk again. She sent messages every few days, but her words always felt hollow. "Stay strong. You're doing great." They replied with gratitude and jokes, but she could read the pain behind every line. She understood it, because she carried her own. The medal they'd given her sat in a box in her locker, tucked away behind an old photo of her father in uniform. He'd been her hero growing up, a Marine sniper in Desert Storm. When he died, she joined the SEALs to honor him. But now, when she looked at his photo, she wondered if he'd really want her to walk this same lonely road. That morning, her commanding officer, Captain Briggs, called her into his office. "Collins," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him, "you've been off the grid. Reports from your instructors say you're showing signs of burnout." "I'm fine, sir." He studied her quietly. "You're not fine. You're a soldier who's seen too much and refuses to talk about it." Her jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, I'm not the first." "No," he said softly, "but you might be one of the few who can still turn it around before it eats you alive." He leaned forward, voice lower now. "They want you to speak at the Naval Academy next week. Motivational talk. You're a hero, Collins. People need to hear your story." She almost laughed. "My story isn't motivational, sir." "Then make it real," he said. "They need that more than anything." That night she sat alone in her apartment, the sound of waves faint through the window. Her rifle rested on the table in front of her, unloaded, stripped down, clean. She ran her fingers along the cold steel, tracing the grooves like an old scar. The faces came back to her, the men she'd shot, the explosion, scream echoing through the radio. She tried to block it out, but the images played on repeat, clear as film. She squeezed her eyes shut, but that only made it worse. Suddenly her phone buzzed. A message from. "They're saying you might get the Navy Cross. You okay?" She typed, deleted, and retyped before finally replying. "I'm surviving." His response came a minute later. "That's all any of us are doing." She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she put the phone down, leaned back and whispered into the dark, "Surviving isn't living." The following week, Sarah walked into the Naval Academy auditorium, her dress blues sharp, her medals gleaming under the lights. Hundreds of cadets filled the seats, whispering, pointing, some in awe, some in curiosity. When she stepped to the podium, the room fell silent. She looked out at their young faces, fresh, hopeful, unscarred. For a moment she began softly. "They tell me I'm supposed to talk about bravery today, about what it means to be a hero." She paused, scanning the crowd. "But bravery isn't what you think. It's not medals or headlines or even victory. Bravery is staying still when every part of you wants to run. It's watching people you love fall and still finding the strength to move forward." The hall was silent. No one shifted, no one coughed. She continued, voice firm now. "They say I took down 8 men that day, but I remember their faces, every one of them. War doesn't leave you when you come home, it lives in you, and you have to decide whether to let it break you or build you." When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause, but Sarah didn't smile. She only nodded once and stepped down from the stage. As she walked out into the sunlight, a young cadet ran up to her. "Ma'am, that was incredible. You made me want to serve." Sarah stopped and looked him in the eye. "Then remember this, courage isn't pulling the trigger, it's living with what happens after." That night, as the sun set over the Pacific, Sarah sat on the beach, the waves curling at her boots. For the first time in months, she felt something shift inside her, not peace exactly, but acceptance. She couldn't erase what she'd done, but maybe, just maybe, she could use it to help others carry their own scars. And as the stars broke through the twilight, she whispered to herself, "I'm still here." Years had passed since the mountains of Afghanistan, yet Lieutenant Sarah Collins remained unchanged in one way, the quiet intensity in her eyes. She had retired from active duty, leaving the SEALs behind for a cabin in northern Montana, the same rugged landscape where she had grown up. Pine trees surrounded the wooden home, snow-capped peaks gleaming in the distance. The valley was calm here, a stark contrast to the chaos of war. Yet even in this serenity, she carried the echoes of battle in every step. The cabin was small but practical. Her rifle rested in a secure case, medals tucked away in a drawer, and photos of her team lined the mantel. She brewed coffee each morning and watched the sunrise paint the mountains gold. It was simple life, but her mind never stopped replaying those moments of fire and death, of lives saved and lives lost. Despite the isolation, she remained connected to the world she had left behind. Young recruits often sought her out, drawn by the legend of the SEAL sniper who disappeared and returned like a storm. They arrived at her cabin eager for guidance, notebooks in hand, cameras rolling. Sarah rarely spoke of herself. Instead, she taught lessons in silence, patience, and precision. She walked them through the forests, showing how to move without being seen, how to listen to the wind, how to wait until the world slowed to a single heartbeat. One afternoon, a cadet asked, "Ma'am, how did you stay so calm when everything was falling apart?" Sarah gazed at the horizon, the forest swaying gently behind her. "You don't fight the storm. You become the eye of it, and when you finally act, every movement must count." Her voice was soft but carried weight. In that lesson lay everything she had learned, the discipline, the courage, and the burden of seeing life and death in a single glance. At night, she often sat by the fire, her journal open. She wrote letters she would never send, words meant to soothe herself or her ghosts. Sometimes she wrote sometimes to the men who hadn't returned. Most of the time, she wrote to herself, chronicling each shot, each decision, each heartbeat that had kept her team alive. Writing was the only way she could exhale the memories that clung to her like smoke. The world had called her a hero, given medals, and celebrated her feats. But she never wore those labels outside the base. She didn't seek recognition, she sought purpose. Her legacy wasn't in the accolades, it was in the soldiers she trained, the young men and women who would one day carry the weight of battle themselves. Every time one of them returned safely because of something she had taught, she felt a quiet triumph, a reminder that her path wasn't defined by the battlefield alone. One evening, as twilight settled across the mountains, she hiked to the ridge where she once practiced in Montana's early mornings. The wind brushed her face, whispering through the pines. She paused, rifle slung loosely on her back, eyes sweeping the valley below. It was peaceful. The world was still, yet alive. In that moment, Sarah understood something she had never realized before. Her story would outlive her deeds because it wasn't about bullets or medals. It was about resilience, focus, and the courage to endure. Legends, she knew, were born in the quiet moments just as much as in the storms of battle. Her story had traveled far, whispered in barracks and training grounds. They laughed when the SEAL sniper vanished, until her bullets found them, one after another. But the real lesson wasn't fear. It was strength, calm, and responsibility. As night fell, stars glittered like scattered diamonds above the valley. Sarah leaned against a rock, her breath steady, her mind finally still for the first time in years. She let herself smile softly, not for glory, but for survival, for legacy, for life. Her story would be told, retold, and remembered, not just as a tale of war, but as a lesson for those who followed. Courage is quiet, power is precise, and true heroes live on not in medals but in the lives they touch. Lieutenant Sarah Collins, the Silent Storm, had finally found peace.